Today, my friend Eat Your Greens released his long-awaited masterpiece about Milady Fire Emblem. It's a really good video, and if you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely check it out. Link in the description and end card. But since I am the red cav to his green cav, when Eat Your Greens made a really good video about an overpowered wyvern that he hates, I was duty-bound to make a halfway decent video about an okay wyvern that I absolutely love. And that is Shersh from Fire Emblem Awakening. My love affair with Shersh began a few years ago, back when the primary focus of this channel was to 0% every game in the franchise. The third one I tackled was Fire Emblem Awakening, and you definitely shouldn't go back and watch those videos are awful, but they're relevant for today's topic because the way that I tackled 0% Awakening hard was by giving Shersh every stat booster in the game, aside from the magic ones. The reason I did this is that while Shersh's join time is a little bit awkward in a growths playthrough since most of your investment projects will outclass her, it was perfect for a 0% run, since especially on hard difficulty, she just needs a little bit of a boost to be the strongest unit in your army for the remainder of the campaign. Well, at least until Flavia and Basilio show up. I used these stats combined with her innate flight to attempt to functionally LTC the entire Volmar, since it's predominantly made up of kill boss maps. So when combining Shersh's mounted movement, ability to ignore terrain, and easy access to the Deliverer skill, Shersh is able to blitz her way across even the largest maps the game has to offer. And for that reason, she's a bit of a darling unit amongst other 0% growths players or those who are interested in low turn count playthroughs. If you want an example of this in action, Topaz's Lunatic 0% growths playthrough is linked in the description below. And it makes pretty heavy use of Shersh right from the get-go, with her putting in work on her join map. But I probably don't need to make an entire video about how the mid-game flyer with decent bases is good in a hacked mode where none of your units can grow. Because as much as I love the Zero Growth challenge, I recognize that that's not how most people play these games. So instead, I want to take a look at how Shersh performs in a more normal playthrough of Awakening. Although, I will be the first to admit, I'm not exactly an Awakening expert. I've only done about a dozen Lunatic playthroughs, and I've never beaten the game on Lunatic Plus. Awakening is probably the game that has the most misinformation about it floating around, simply because of the number of people who reduce the metagame to Robin Solo LOL. And the last thing I want to do is add more information onto the pile due to my lack of experience. So I reached out to fellow YouTuber Ellery, and he's gonna hate me for saying this, but he is absolutely an Awakening expert. If you haven't seen anything on their channel, it is linked below, and you should absolutely subscribe because they make much better videos than me. But suffice to say, I ran my initial thoughts past them, got a good amount of feedback and corrections, and updated my notes for this video accordingly. It's still possible I get some stuff wrong, so if there's anything incorrect, just assume that that comes from me. And if there's anything that sounds incredibly smart, well, that's definitely Ellery's work. If you've been training a good number of primary combat units, then Shersh is probably going to look somewhat outclassed upon her join. And this is especially unfortunate for her because her join map, Chapter 12, is one of the hardest levels in the main campaign. If you're already struggling to achieve victory, then it can be a bit of a tall ask to funnel EXP into this brand new unit. It's definitely not impossible to feed her kills, and the fact that Shersh can be helpful in Chapter 12, even if it's only a little bit, is a testament to her power as a unit. But I think for a lot of units, this map marks an unimpressive start to Shersh's combat career. Although, thankfully, if you don't want her to see too much more fighting, she does have a way to be useful as a utility unit, and that is to instantly promote into the Griffin Knight class. At level 5, Griffins learn the skill Deliverer, which gives them +2 movement when they have a backpack. So with the low investment cost of 1 Master Seal and 5 levels worth of experience, Shersh can help to ferry your real combat units around while not caring about any of her stats other than movement. And turning any of your player-phased elite buttons into a 10-move flyer on demand sounds pretty nice. In the context of a low turn clear, then you can have Shersh escort your boss killer to the bosses on the various kill boss maps in the Volmar, But even in a more traditional playthrough, the high movement lets you bring your delete bots to problematic enemies. And this is especially relevant in Lunatic Plus, where you want to delete specific enemies such as counter units or Hawkeye people who can fight your dodge tanks. And in the period after Shersh joins, there are a number of pretty flight-intensive maps coming up. Chapter 13 has cliffs to dart back and forth between. Chapter 14 takes place on 4 ships that are connected to each other. Chapter 15 features a sandy beach that acts like a pseudo-desert map. Chapter 16 is made up of a bunch of tree branches that being able to fly between is useful. And Chapter 18 has a bunch of lava that you want to dart around. After that, flight stops being super useful until around Chapter 24, but even on the maps where flight doesn't do anything for you, 10 move is still 10 move. Being able to push forward by 10 spaces and then use the rescue staff to yoink your unit back to safety is a tactic that will make Lunatic, and especially Lunatic Plus, a lot easier for you. If you want to lean into Shersh as a support unit / backpack, you could potentially get Dual Assist Plus on her from the Valkyrie line. In a playthrough that allows for grinding, this is perfectly fine and achievable. Just plop her into Valkyrie and staff spam until you hit 15. As a bonus, this would also give you access to rally resistance on turns where Shersh doesn't have anything better to do. And if you go through the Troubadour line first, you also get Demoiselle, for a pretty solid support kit all things considered. But in a no-grind context, I would say it's probably not worth the investment. The main draw of Valkyrie Dual Support Plus is a level 15 promoted skill, and as such requires Shersh to be outside of the flying class for quite some time. And as I just said, flight is useful in the mid-game. Valkyrie does at the very least maintain that 8 movement, so she can still be a 10 move escort with Deliverer, but 10 squares as a grounded unit is very different from 10 squares as a flying one. Turning Shersh into a dedicated backpack / escort is a boring, but in my opinion, pretty effective way to make use of her. However, if you want her to embrace the namesake of her wyvern Minerva and become the true Milady archetype, Shersh does have a number of tools available to her that can allow her to be a decent enemy phase sweeper. Shersh is unfortunately lacking in offensive tools. She doesn't have access to Gale Force, so if you want to do hit and run tactics, you're going to have to use Rescue on her. On its own, this isn't the end of the world, but Shersh is also lacking in any damage boosting fares. Her only one is Tome Fair, and Shersh is not magically inclined enough to make Sage work, at least outside of a grinding context. This is why I think it's generally better to place her in an enemy-facing role than a player-facing role, because you really want your player-face units to be able to delete whatever enemy comes their way, including the Pavise ones on Lunatic Plus. As far as her sweeping performance, Shersh does have a solid amount of physical bulk in the Wyvern line, and this line offers a number of skills that can be useful for tanking. Divinity, which Shersh starts with, gives a passive 10 hit and avoid if you don't have any allies within 3 spaces. And Quick Burn gives 15 hit and avoid on turn 1, although this bonus will decrease by 1 point over time until on turn 16 it gives 0. Still, I tend to find that on most Fire Emblem games, the important combats happen near the beginning of the map, not the end. And as a result of this, Quick Burn is very valuable. From these 2 skills alone, you gain 25 hit and avoid, which is a not insignificant chunk. But they can stack even further because Shersh has access to 2 different breaker skills, those being Sword Breaker and Lance Breaker. Each of these give an additional 50 hit and avoid if the enemy is wielding the appropriate weapon. So against Sword users, Sword Breaker will boost you by 50, and against Lance users, Lance Breaker will boost you by 50. Sword Breaker is particularly notable because swords are the most accurate weapon type in the game, and Shersh tends to use axes, so this breaker skill is effective if she's at weapon triangle disadvantage, counteracting the penalty she faces and then some. But the fact that all of these hit and avoid boosting skills stack with each other means that on turn 1, you can potentially have a total of 75 extra evade against sword units. In most Fire Emblem games, I'm not a huge fan of dodge tanking, but Awakening isn't exactly most Fire Emblem games. Between the pair-up system, giving you a number of dual guards at higher support ranks, and the large number of avoid stacking skills you can place on a singular unit, you can often get yourselves into situations where your enemy phase sweepers are relying on their avoid more so than their raw bulk in order to tank enemies. Or, as is the case with Shersh, combining the two of them. Wyvern Lord has solid bulk, but it's not going to be enough on its own to take on the hordes you want a sweeper to face. However, with an S-rank backpack alongside the avoid boosting skills, Shersh can get herself to the point where the chances of failure are less than 1%. Especially when you account for the fact that Awakening uses the 2RN system. For those who haven't heard of it before, 2RN means that instead of rolling a single number for the percentage chance, the game rolls 2 and then averages them and uses that for the percentage chance. What this means is that any number below 50 is actually going to have a significantly lower chance of being rolled than it would if it were a 1RN system. There's an entire grid on Serenus Forest to show you what each value corresponds with, but just to give you an example, if an enemy has a 25% chance to hit Shersh, which is not all that unlikely considering all the avoid skills she has, the actual chance of their attack connecting is 12.75%. Certainly not the sort of thing you should rely on dodging every single time, but if you're facing multiple 12% hits and all of them need to hit you for Shersh to die, then you can easily get to the point where the chances of failure are slim to none. Of course, if you're playing on the Lunatic Plus difficulty, you are going to want to beware of Hawkeye units, since they ignore any hit chances and will always connect their attack even if they have a 0% chance. But if you factor this damage into your calculations, or simply kill the Hawkeye units with your player phase units, then it is definitely possible for your dodge tanks to handle enemy phases on their own. That being said, Shersh is still lacking in a couple of traits to be a premier enemy phase unit. While her physical bulk is quite great, her resistance really isn't, and Awakening does often throw mixed groups of enemies at you, so being a purely physical tank is going to be a bit of a problem. This is not a issue wholly unique to Shersh, but the other good enemy phase units often end up running self-healing, either through Nosferatu or the Soul skill, and Shersh doesn't have access to either of these options. But to my mind, these are not the biggest limitations to Shersh as a combat unit. Instead, I would say that her biggest downside is the thing that makes her such a good utility unit, and that being innate flight. The mid-game and late game of Awakening loves giving forged silver bows and forged arc wings to enemies. Whether they be assassins, dark knights, sages, or warriors, there's almost always going to be a smattering of flyer effectiveness. You can, of course, keep Shersh out of the range of these enemies, or delete them with player phase units, although oftentimes this is a task easier said than done, especially when accounting for things like the 10 range Bow Knight ambush spawns. But more to the point, this is just another limitation that Shersh faces that other similar units would not. You've got to keep away from flying units, kill the Hawkeye units, keep yourself out of range of allies to keep Divinity on, do most of your sweeping in the earlier turns of the map, and spend Staffer's player phase actions healing Shersh up since she isn't able to self-sustain with Nosferatu or Soul. At a certain point, you have to wonder whether it's worth trying to run Shersh over someone who more easily accomplishes this role, such as Vake or Gregor. Don't get me wrong, Shersh isn't unusable, nobody in the franchise is, but she just feels like she's facing an uphill battle at times. But despite this, I love her. It might be a holdover from my 0% growths run, but for some reason I just find myself with an insane amount of affinity for this often disappointing Wyvern girl. In my most recent Lunatic playthrough, in an effort to remove the flying weakness, I sent her into War Cleric, where she could still do some good enemy phase combat. And as a bonus, on turns where she wasn't doing anything with her action, she could use stabs to help out. Despite her low magic, even just rescuing someone 2 or 3 tiles is very useful. When I talked about this with Ellery, he actually described it as GBA rescue dropping but with 1 unit, and I can't believe I hadn't made that connection yet, but yeah, that's kind of what a 2 to 3 range rescue is. But removing Shersh from Minerva felt disappointing, not just from a story perspective, but also because she gave up the flight access that is so useful in the mid-game Valmar. Now she can take on more groups of enemies than she could before, but I need someone else to fly her around if I don't want to deal with things like lava tiles in the beach. It's a shame because Shersh feels like she has a lot going for her. She's just on the edge of being truly busted. But unfortunately, unlike most Fire Emblem games, base stats and flight alone just don't seem to cut it. As a certified Fates fangirl, I can't help but wonder about how the Fates support system would have affected Shersh. Since her fastest support partner is Virion, she could quickly get the Bow Knight line and potentially add Bowbreaker to her list of avoid skills. And this would go a long way towards reducing her vulnerability to anti-flight units. I'm not sure if that on its own would be enough to push her over the edge, but it certainly feels like it would be. Thanks so much for watching the video. I once again want to give a huge shout out to Ellery for letting me bounce some thoughts off of them, and pointing out strategies that I had overlooked. And of course, the point of this video is to direct you all to a much better made video by Eat Your Greens, about Shersh's fellow Minerva archetype, Milady. So please go check that out and subscribe to both of them while you're at it. But now, as always, I want to thank my patrons. Thank you to Eris, Smaz Ruby, Len, Zycrom, Gameboo, Robin D, Karosa, Alenby, Fyrant, Ethan P3, Girlboss, Lizard Bongwater, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Calamity Callie, Thaythom, Andu, Reflect, a clever username of lies, YLO1, George Grenville the 7th PM, Jamie Collins, Mean Jojo, Thick Molder, Arvis, Tailored Muffin, Floahay, Faulty Videos, Lyra, Toaster But Really, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Just Riley, Anna Cabana, Belle Wenska, Dysike, Ginger, Root Beer Pants, Queen Elizam, Aerith Emblem, Adele, Gabe the Green, Control Daegis, Roman Kormancic, Nick Knack Hammersmack, SUP, Caius Cole, High Cyclop, and especially my Jagans, Autumn Kelsey, Some Trades, and Lilzabeth. If you would like your name in these credits, as well as early access to videos, polls to influence the channel, and a couple of other benefits, then there is a link to my Patreon below, but please only donate if you can comfortably afford to do so. I don't want anyone going broke over Fire Emblem stuff. Free ways to support the channel include liking, subscribing, and commenting. Speaking of which, today's comment code word is Tsubaki. So if you made it to the end of the video, please include Tsubaki in your comment, that way I know you made it. But with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers. Surprise second credits roll. So I recorded this video 2 months ago, but for a variety of reasons it was delayed on release until now. So I thought it was only right to thank not only the people who backed me when I recorded it, but also the people who backed me at the time I released it. So, thank you, Key the Iron Idol, Calamity Callie, and Wanderer, a clever username of lies, Jackson McMahon, Saren Galaxy, Tailored Muffin, Andu, Len, Gameboo, Karosa, Fyrant, Your Doctor, Frozen Helm, Girlboss, Lizard Bongwater, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Jaden, Reflect, Alan Proveste, Guigi555, Smaz Ruby, Zycrom, Robin D, Alenby, Hound Dogs, Thaythom, Electric Giga, Erica Ford, YLO1, George Grenville the 7th PM, Arvis, Crispy Matthews, Floahay, I Like Rattata, Henry Fint, Amy Hazel, Neas Costa, Faulty Videos, Lyra, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Just Riley, Anna Cabana, Some Trades, The Daily Foogle, Faye, Magic Bite, Sardonic Muse, Dysike, Chris, Root Beer Pants, Queen Elizam, Aerith Emblem, Control Daegis, Roman Kormancic, Nick Knack Hammersmack, Mike, Lepton, Bosnian Dave, SUP, Caius Cole, Histiklop, Bree, Punchfighter Champion, Eggman, Maxine the Vampire Queen, Dragonback Lancer, Carrier has left, Jill, and especially my Jagans, Thick Molder, Adele, Alexander Roper, Siggy, Hypefish, and FM Towns. Alright, we're done for real now. Bye-bye!